Welcome to Fusion Fiction. Join us as we explore the limitless boundaries of imagination, bringing you captivating stories that unfold with every episode. Let your ears be the canvas where characters come to life, plots twist and turn, and emotions resonate long after the final word. Immerse yourself in the magic of storytelling with Fusion Fiction on Spotify with your host Madhulika Rajahan, where genres blend seamlessly and every episode promises a new discovery. A warm hello to all of you who have tuned in. And thank you so much for the response to my last story, The Wall of Clocks. Now, let me tell you, the idea for the story actually came when I visited a neighbor's house who had 4 clocks hung on the wall. Yes, not one, not two, not three, but 4. It spiked my interest to say the least. And I started to weave a story keeping the wall in mind. So, have you come across an artifact or a piece of furniture in somebody's house which has spiked your interest? Do let me know and write to me. For our next episode of Fusion Fiction, the 8th in the series, I have yet another story, The Chemistry Book. I hope this interests you. In the icy grip of Kashmir's night, Captain Rathore's team makes a discovery that will haunt them forever. The line between friend and foe blurs in the most unexpected way. What happens when the enemy isn't who he thought he was? And what if the true battle isn't out there, but within? To find out more, tune into Fusion Fiction on the 3rd of October. Stay tuned. The Chemistry Book. Lie low! Major Rathore snapped as a Sipahi tossed visibly to his side. We could not afford a mistake like that. His movements might reveal our location. What time is it? 0200 hours, sir. We still have 1 hour, Major Rathore said to himself, keeping his eyes laden with tiny particles of snow resting on his eyelids, focused on the target. I kept quiet. I had been taught to keep quiet. So I did. We had been through several ambush exercises, but this one was different, far removed from the safety of the academy. As we lay in wait under the cover of snow, the reality of Operation Rakshak hit me. This was no drill, and the stakes were as high as they could get. We were facing a live target, deep in the hostile terrain of Kashmir, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The operation was named thus as we had to rescue the foreigner taken hostage by an alleged militant group. The one important thing I had learned during my course at the academy was be well stocked with food and don't forget the ammunition. It was easier to concentrate on a full stomach rather than an empty one. 4 hours had passed since we left the base, following the tip about the militants' location. They had changed their base several times in the last 1 month, each time missing them by just a few minutes. They probably had an informer. We would be greeted by empty rooms left in a state of chaos. Overturned storage boxes, half-emptied cabinets, spilled food on the floor as they had hurried to take their basic survival food with them. It was only a matter of time that we caught them. Time had been on their side, favoring them each time by a few minutes. The cold seeped through my uniform as we were stuck outside in sub-zero temperature, waiting to ambush the terrorists. The wind chill made it worse, more than like a -20 than a -5. The trees, stripped bare, stretched their gnarled branches in the dark, casting eerie shadows. We could not take cover in the tree or build canopies around. The night snow had rendered the terrain softer, but walking through it remained challenging. With each step we took, we dug our boots into the fuzzy, cold softness till our shins. The pitch darkness of the night made it more difficult to navigate the areas for pertinent danger from potholes and, more importantly, landmines. We had taken 3 hours to cover a short distance of 500 meters on foot. Our white bodysuits, which saved us from being detected, added to the discomfort while walking. The awkwardly positioned branches swayed madly in the strong wind, making it difficult to keep our eyes open. The wind whipped up snowflakes, stinging our faces like needles. The icy blast left my skin numb, making it hard to speak. I clenched my jaw and lowered my head, bracing against the biting cold. Our feet had borne the burden of this cold night the longest. We had been lying low, positioned at the house with our rifles ready to strike. My legs felt as if they had swollen to twice my body weight. The lights in the house were still on. We could see slight movement from inside the window. We had planned to strike at 0300 hours. The house was far from the habited area, so we were not at a risk of exposing innocent human lives while carrying the operation. The army had always been the easy target by the pushy media whenever there was any civilian casualty. Nobody understood that while the operation went on, we could not risk letting the plan getting exposed before the actual execution. Major Rathore's eyes scanned the horizon, but his voice carried a softer edge. "Captain, ever think about what you'll do once this all is over?" Caught off guard, I glanced at him. "Not much time for that, sir." He gave me a faint smile, still watching the house. "You got someone waiting back home?" "Yes, sir. Medical student in Pune." I shifted slightly, feeling the cold seep deeper into my bones. "Good," Rathore said quietly. "Keep her in mind. Helps to have someone worth going back to." I nodded, my hand instinctively brushing the chest pocket where Pallavi's picture was safely tucked away. Without him asking, I unzipped my jacket and handed the photograph to him. He took it without a word, his expression softening as he glanced at her smiling face in the dim light of the pencil torch. "You're a lucky man, Captain. Keep her close." His hurt reminder that we still had something worth fighting for, even in this frozen, unforgiving landscape. I kept her picture back in the pocket, my mind thinking of the moment I met her while she was working in the Pune hospital during a brief leave. I was out on liberty and had been struck by a speeding car in the city. My friends took me to the civilian hospital to get bandaged, where I saw her for the first time. The pain in my knee faded as I focused on her face, her long, fragrant hair, and her shapely body. She kept asking me if I felt anything. Yes, I wanted to say, but it was not pain. It was pure ecstasy being touched tenderly by her. I kept coming back to see her even when my wound had healed. At last, she gave in and agreed to take me as her long-term patient. Sounds of a muffled bang hit our ears, like a homemade firecracker. It came from somewhere outside the house. We had been found again. Damn it! "Move!" Major Rathore shouted to all of us. We moved ourselves from our latent positions in a position to strike, moving towards the house in a hurry. All the caution we had been following till now to detect any holes or landmines was thrown away. The house was hardly 25 meters away. We surrounded the house from all directions, and I moved with 2 other armed men behind me for cover. We moved towards the front door. I placed my foot on the door and pushed it open. The door was latched tightly from inside. No gunfire was heard after the first shot was fired. Strange. All three of us applied pressure and pushed the door open. We went inside the house and opened fire. We had to make the first strike. The remaining members of the team had climbed the wall from the rear end of the house in case the terrorists tried to escape from behind. We stepped in the house, cautiously looking around for any hidden traps and threats. We caught a glimpse of a man hiding behind the wall of the second room. I motioned the two members behind me to take a position behind the wall while I went for the strike. He glimpsed again. I opened fire from my gun. I heard a loud cry of pain, confirming my bullets had hit him. I checked the other rooms for any movement. There was none. The sight of his blood-soaked body turned my stomach. Not the slightest movement from the body as it lay dead. His back still leaning against the wall as the rest of his limp body spread on the ground. The bullet wounds had made a mesh on his chest, and the blood trickled through them. The blood was thick, making its way out of his body, which had been alive only a few minutes ago. His face, though covered with his own blood, was devoid of any bullet wounds. His eyes were still open. They looked alive. Our bullets had not been able to take life out of them. Their focus was fixed on a point on the wall behind me. I looked back to see what he could have been looking at. On the wall hung a framed ayat on a green background from the Holy Quran. He must have known his end was near and had been praying. I closed his eyes with my blood-ridden hands as his gaze focused on the wall. "Check him thoroughly for any contacts," Major Rathore shouted from the end of the room. He had been checking the rooms since we had raided the house, in case someone had fled the site. The terrorist must have been the same age as me, not too old. His skin was still taut and clear from any sign of wrinkles. I turned his body over to check his pocket. His dead body weight felt heavier. I felt his body for any bombs which might have been taped on him. There were none. There was a slight bulge over his left pocket. I placed my bloodied hand over it. I reached out to pull my gun besides the body to bend over. I took out what looked like a note closed in an envelope, now stained with his blood from my hand. I opened the envelope to find a picture of the man, now lying dead, along with what looked like his wife and a child in happier times. His face had a glow of happiness as he stood being photographed with his family. The child had his arms wound around his father's neck for support. Both the father and the child looked content. I flipped the picture over. "Come back soon. I love you, Abba." The all-caps letters stared back at me. The handwriting was crooked, like a child who had only recently learned to spell and write. It was perhaps his son who had written it, who had so fondly clung to his father in the picture I held. I swallowed. My throat parched. His Abba was never coming back. I kept the picture in my pocket and proceeded to see if I could find anything else more valuable to us. The room was tidy and orderly, reminiscent of any army hostel accommodations. Basic yet functional. I checked the table in the corner. A few books lay well aligned on the top. I quickly checked the titles. The Holy Quran, a book on chemical formula, and a small book in Farsi script. The book on chemical formula intrigued me most. I picked up the book and flipped the pages to check if they were hiding any notes we could use. The pages had been carefully marked and formulas highlighted on every page. There were a couple of notes in pencil on the margin of some of the pages, marked IMP for important, I presumed. They were not found in any of them. I always thought terrorists to be young, uneducated, misguided youth who had been maneuvered by religious clerics into taking arms for one reason or the other. The case here, however, was as different from the stereotypes as could be. We had here an educated, young, and religious man who incidentally was loved by his family, but still had taken the road towards destruction. Moron. After conducting the search for another couple of hours, we came out of the house, feeling content that we had not left anything untouched or unnoticed. The bodies was being rolled and zipped into a body bag to be transferred to our base for identification. The fate was still undecided. I lighted a cigarette as I came out of the house. Lighter? Major Rathore asked as he came towards me. I was standing near the rear exit of the house. Pieces of broken earthen pot scattered on the ground. I stepped on a bigger piece, breaking it further into smaller pieces. I lighted his cigarette as he placed the butt on his lips to take a drag. Puffing out coils of smoke into an already dense winter air, he sighed. His face and nose had been blotched red with an impact of the cold wind on his face. Dark circles around his eyes had penetrated deeper as the sleep deprivation struck harder. His face no longer looked handsome. I did not see a single damn sign of a foreigner anywhere, nor his stuff. He must have been moved, as always, I reasoned. He bit his puckered brown lip as he spoke. I looked at him, trying to comprehend the last lines he said. In the wee hours of the morning, we stood sharing our fags. Birds had started to chirp and take flight in groups in search of food. A few house sparrows had scattered around the house's windowsill, looking for food. They chirped with happiness as they picked up tiny seeds in their beaks and flew. The sky had turned the lightest shade of orange as it prepared itself for the arrival of the morning sun. No, he was never there, Major Rathore said finally. The house was silent now, the only sounds being crackling of the frost and the calls of the morning birds. As I stood outside, cigarette smoke curling into the cold air, my mind raced. Major Rathore's words hung heavy between us. The foreigner we were supposed to rescue was nowhere to be found. I stared at the chemistry book I had found in the room. I glanced at Major Rathore, who was still mulling over the failed mission. His face, etched with exhaustion and frustration, mirrored my own inner turmoil. We had lost more than a mission tonight. We had found a wrong target. I took a deep drag from my cigarette, feeling the drag from my cigarette, feeling the cold sear my lungs, the weight of my actions, the decisions we made, and their consequences felt crushingly real. I looked back at the body we'd just left behind, a man who was now nothing more than a lifeless shell, stained with his own blood. The picture of him with his family clutched tightly in my pocket, weighed on my conscience like a leaden anchor. The child's called message, "Come back soon, I love you, Abba," echoed in my mind. This was the right location we had been tipped about, sir. I finally spoke, as conviction left my voice. Yes, it was. Only... He paused, taking a long last drag at his cigarette, reached the stub. This was not a terrorist hideout. He looked into my eyes. I looked back at him in silence. His eyes weary from the night's operation and waiting out in the cold. They were burdened. The chemistry book, I murmured at last, this time with a newfound gravity. It wasn't just a book. It was a testament to a life that might have been lived differently, a life that could have contributed to something greater than the conflict that consumed him. As the first light of the dawn began to break, casting a pale glow over the desolate landscape, I realized the full weight of the man's loss, and perhaps my own.